Yo, what's going on YouTube? My name's SoFlo Sneakers, and today's video is going to be an in-depth tutorial on AYCD's Autosolve software. So by the end of this video, you should have a good understanding of how Autosolve works, and you should also have a good understanding of the pros and cons of using Autosolve versus just using a typical solver within your bot. So this is a highly requested video, and I'm super excited to get it out for you guys, and on that note, let's get into it. So to start this video off, I'm going to go over some general information related to Autosolve. So in order to use Autosolve, you already need an active AYCD Toolbox subscription. If you go onto AYCD's website right now, you'll see that a Toolbox subscription costs $30 a month. There's a ton of cook groups out there though that have AYCD partnerships, which could bring your monthly cost down to either $18 or $23 a month. As you can see on the top left of my screen, it says One Click X Calicos, and Calicos is a well-known cook group, and since I bought my AYCD Toolbox subscription through them, I currently only pay $18 a month. So once you have a Toolbox subscription, Autosolve is going to be an additional $10 a month. I was lucky enough to get Autosolve in their beta period, which brings my cost to $5 a month. Unfortunately, you can't get it at this price point anymore, so if you go onto their website, it's going to be $10 a month for Autosolve. So the easiest way that I would explain Autosolve's function is that it basically just replaces the solver that's already built into many bots. So for example, if you own Splashforce, you know that this solver is called the Recap 3 Harvester. You also know that this solver is sometimes laggy, and it also sometimes has bugs that kind of make it difficult to use. So this is exactly where Autosolve comes into play. Many bots, including Splashforce, have now added settings that allow their bots to connect to Autosolve through an API. So I get that might sound a little confusing right now, but I'm going to hop over into Splashforce so you guys can see exactly what I'm talking about. So as you guys could see, I'm now in Splashforce and I'm right over here in the Settings tab. And as you could see right here, there's a setting that says AYCD API. So there's a ton of bots that AYCD Autosolve supports, and I'm going to leave a link in the description to all of the supported bots. But if your bot does support AYCD Autosolve, you should see a setting similar to this. So once you enable this setting and you type in your API key and your access token, which I'll show you how to get in just a second, it's basically going to turn off the solver within your bot, and it's going to use the Gmails and proxies that are in AYCD to solve any capture requests that might be coming in at the time of the drop. I just want to clarify real quick that you're either using one or the other. You can't use AYCD Autosolve and the Recap 3 Harvester in Splashforce. You can either use one or the other. Although I do use Autosolve, I just want to mention that it's important to have your Gmails and proxies ready just in case Autosolve goes down and you need to sign into the solvers within your bot. So I'm going to show you guys a clip real quick from my last live cop video just so you can kind of see Autosolve in action and just so you can get a better understanding of what's going on. Over to the solver, see how it's doing. Yeah, look at this. This thing's going ham. We have 500 and it's just going to town. So as you guys just saw, that was Autosolve in action from my last live cop video for the bariums, and it was just absolutely going to town. I was using roughly 15 Gmail accounts, and at the end of that terrible drop, which was like 2 hours long, I had over 6,000 V3 captchas solved. Another key point I wanted to talk about is since Autosolve is linked to bots through an API, it allows you to run your Autosolve or your AYCD software on a different machine than your bot. So for the last drop, I was running my bot on my local host just on my computer, and I was running Autosolve on my server. Being able to run Autosolve in my bot on two different instances is a huge upside for me because it takes a lot less resources from my computer, and it also allows me to run a lot more tasks much more smoothly. Another upside about using Autosolve is that it allows you to stay on the same browser when you're farming your Gmails as well as when you're solving the captchas. This gets a little technical, so just bear with me on this, but basically every single bot has a different browser that they use for their in-bot solver. So Autosolve's browser is going to be different from Splashforce's browser, and then Splashforce's browser could be different from another bot's browser, but ideally you want to keep these browsers the same. So if you're farming your Gmails on AYCD, if you're farming them on Essentials or Wraith, these are all most likely going to have different browsers. And then when you go and you sign into your in-bot solver, this is also going to be another browser change. And that's what's going to increase your chances of keeping a high trust score with Google. So to sum it up, when you're farming with AYCD, you're going to be using the same browser as if you were using Autosolve with AYCD, so you won't incur any browser changes, which looks very, very good for Google, and it's just the ideal situation on what you want to be doing. So now, since we went over a few pros of using Autosolve, unfortunately we have to go over a few cons. So the first one I can think of is that about a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago, AYCD's entire server was getting DDoSed. And if you don't know what a DDoS is, it's basically just someone sending a ton of requests to their server so it crashes. This kept happening right before the drop times, so I was always scrambling to sign into my solvers and stuff like that. Keep in mind though that this hasn't happened recently, and since these DDoS attacks, the AYCD team has completely upgraded their server and they put precautions in place in case these attacks happen again. That isn't to say that something like this can't happen again, but it seems like there's a much lower chance of it happening now. Another con that isn't necessarily related to Autosolve, but it's mostly related to just farming softwares in general. So before my last live cop video, about half of my Gmails were 0.91 clicks and the other half was either a 0.7 or a 0.9. Since this drop, 90% of my Gmails dropped to a 0.3 score, even ones that I didn't use during the drop. So the AYCD team has been saying that Google pushed an update that now makes a 0.9 score much harder to achieve than it normally did. It seems like it has affected a lot of people, and a lot of people are now in the same boat as me, and I've been farming since and I haven't really seen much recovery. So my Gmails aren't looking great right now, but hopefully I can make some changes before the Zions that'll help build the trust up so they can get back to where they were. So now, since we went over some general information and some pros and some cons, I'm going to show you guys how to set up Autosolve so you'll be good to go at the time of a drop. So if you just got AYCD or Autosolve, you might not see this Autosolve tab right up here. So what you're going to want to do is come over to Settings, and then you're going to want to click Enable Autosolve, and then you're going to hit Save, and then it's going to ask you to restart, which you want to do, and then you should have this Autosolve tab right up here. So the first thing I'm going to show you guys how to do is how to get the API key and the access token that you need to put into your bot so that Autosolve can connect to it. To do this, you obviously need Autosolve first, so once you have that, sign into your dashboard and you should see a screen like mine here. So once you sign into AYCD, you're going to want to scroll down to Autosolve down here, and for obvious reasons, I'm going to be blurring out my information, so just keep that in mind, and we're going to hit Go to Dashboard. So here's the Autosolve dashboard on AYCD's website. And as you can see up top here, it says copy access token. That one's super easy. You just hit that, copy it to your clipboard, and paste it right into your bot. And then right down here, this is where you're going to get your API key. So I have mine blurred out right here, but as you can see, it says you currently have 1 out of your 6 available API keys. So what's super cool about Autosolve is you can actually create different API keys for different bots. So let's just say that I want to use Autosolve on Splashforce and Cyber. I'll create 2 different API keys for both of these bots, which will allow me to use Autosolve on both of them, which is super cool. So I already have an API key right here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit create. And then you're going to want to give this a name. So I'm just going to do tutorial, boom. It's literally as simple as that. So now on this drop down menu here, I see the tutorial API key, which is unique from my other API key that I use for Splashforce. So what you're going to want to do now is copy this API key and paste it right into your bot. So I just did that, and now you can see on Splashforce they have this little connect/test button, and I'm going to go ahead and click that now. And as you guys can see now, it says that we are connected. So it says error up here, but that's just a little bug. But it says connected, so we should be good to go. If you do end up getting an error message here, make sure that you 100% copy the access token and the API key correctly. And you just want to make sure that AYCD is open and you should be good to go. Another quick fix that sometimes works is you can actually come over to the Autosolve tab and you can try to reset your access token as well. I've had this happen where I just reset it and then it connected fine. So that's just another thing to try out. But if none of this works, then you can always just reach out to the AYCD support in their Discord channel. So now, since our bot is connected, the next thing we want to do is select the Gmails that we want to be using for Autosolve. So you could either manually start your Gmails for Autosolve, or you could come up to the options tab right here, which I think my face is covering it, but you could come down and you could click select all. If we wanted to manually start Autosolve, we would just right click on a Gmail, come down here to start Autosolve, And then we're going to want to be using the normal solver because we're not looking to use the Shopify checkpoint solver. Obviously, if you're running on Shopify, you're going to want to be using this one, but most of the time I'm just using the normal solver. I personally don't select to skip the login verification just because it takes a second and it's totally fine for me. So then you're going to want to hit save. So as you can see, it's now verifying the account, starting, and now it says waiting to solve, Autosolve enabled. And that's what you want to see on all of your Gmails that are using Autosolve at the time of the drop. If you click Start All, AYCD will automatically select a number of Gmails that it's going to be using for Autosolve at once. What this number depends on is the specs of your server or your computer. So if you're running a high-spec server or a high-spec computer, you're going to be able to use more Gmails on Autosolve at once versus if you were using a lower-spec computer, and I'm sure you guys get the idea. So when I click Start All on my 8 CPU server, it starts roughly about 10 Gmails. How you can manually change this, and you have to be wary when you want to do this because it could cause instability within Autosolve, but what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to come to Autosolve up here, and then you're going to want to come right down to this settings tab. And then what you're going to want to do is turn up your local solver limit. So just guys, once again, please be cautious when you're doing this because you don't want AYCD to crash on you. You want to experiment a little bit, but personally I saw that my server could handle 15 Gmails, and that's why I decided to use that many. There's an option here to automatically start a solver and start a new one when multiple errors occur. I personally don't select this because I'm keeping a close eye on my solver. And how you know a solver gets banned is when it's just stuck on solving. When you're looking at your Gmails at the time of a drop, they should say waiting to solve, solving, waiting to solve, solving, and they should keep rotating back and forth. If a solver does get banned at the time of the drop, I just move on to a new Gmail that I haven't already used for this drop. So I don't personally use this service, but AYCD Autosolve does support using third-party CAPTCHA solvers. So I'm going to leave a link in the description to an article that explains that completely, and I'm also going to leave a link to the guides if you need any additional help or support, whatever it may be. And that just about wraps this video up, so please drop a like if you learned something. It really helps me out, and leave questions, comments down in the comment section below, and that's about it. So I'll catch you guys on the next one.